Hey everyone, this is Sean back with From Noob to Nerd. This is video number 9 in my series. For this one, I didn't have a quiet place to go anywhere except for this roof, so I'm filming this one up here today, so if you don't mind, just bear with me while I squint through this video. So I'm going to walk you through our entire third project. This is our first and only group project so far, and for this one what we did was, unlike homeworks where we kind of would work together a little bit, but everyone submitted their own thing, this one we were together the whole time, so every single aspect of the project was collaborated and thought out together. So that was the initial coming up with an idea. We started from scratch and brainstormed some pretty ridiculous things, designed it, came up with the idea, planned it all out, worked together to break up who was going to do what, and eventually coded different pieces, merged the branches together on Git, and finally came up with the final product that I'll show you in a little bit. So it was really cool working in the working in a group for this. Like I said, we've done kind of teamwork together, but never anything this large a scope and this involved. So I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great opportunity to see how other people do things, kind of join strengths and see what we can come up with together working as a team. So really excited. Let's take a look at how that came out.
Before we look at the whole project, one thing that I thought would be really cool to look back on was kind of the whole process throughout and how it came about from start to finish. So let's just take a look at the very beginning phases here. So if you look, this was kind of our vision. We wanted to make a home page, had a little nav bar with these options on it, had a container here that had our name and a little catchphrase, a little component here that had maybe four or so different categories that you could pick, and it would take you to that specific categories page, and then a footer. And you'll see, we get pretty close to this initial vision. It's obviously styled a bit differently, but we actually come pretty close to that. And we wanted to, when you click JavaScript, it takes you to a page that looks like this, where it's got, for the category JavaScript, it's got multiple tutorials, and within each tutorial, it'll have reviews and rankings based on that. So again, I'll show you that, and you can see we get pretty close to how we wanted it to look. So yeah, one other thing before we look at the first version of the page was, we look at these links here, like front end, back end. When we click this, I know when I was thinking about, my past experiences using the web, when I click a button, if it took me to where I wanted to go, great. I didn't think twice about it. It was what was supposed to happen. And if it didn't work, I thought it was just some crappy site, and I never wanted to go there again. So having to design something that worked in a way that felt like it should work was actually pretty challenging. So when we click front end, it's supposed to do something very specific, and so it was kind of challenging to figure out. Okay, so we click this button. What do we want to happen? What's the data we want to be carried somewhere? What do we want it to look like when it's done? And all this stuff. How's the front end going to talk to the back end? And so it's pretty cool to think about that whole process. From start to finish, and what each button should do and how it should render different things. And so you can see here, before we got into too much design, we talked about our front end and back end and how how things are going to coordinate with each other and how it's all going to work out. So let's take a look at what the first design looked like. So this was what we came up with. Pretty rough on the eyes, but our main focus was function, not fashion. So these buttons, I think they worked at the time. I'm not really sure, but it's kind of rough. Again, it's actually pretty close to what we wanted. It's got our nav bar and all these components, but doesn't look all that great. So finally, we got to here. We changed the name of it. We're Sorcerer, and it just looks a bit neater. It's styled a bit more. Everything, all the links work. It still has the main components we're looking for. If you click JavaScript, it would take you to the JavaScript page with all the tutorials, and you'll see that in the next section. But yeah, so it was really cool. I'm glad that I took pictures throughout, because for me it was cool to see the progress, and even though we're happy with this, we know it could be much better. So it's nice to look back and see how far we came from these crappy designs on the whiteboard. And so before we look at the full project, one other thing I thought was really fun was designing the data, right? So this data we didn't get from anywhere. We made this all up ourselves. So when we click on JavaScript and it takes us to all the different tutorials that exist, so like JavaScript, understanding the weird parts, we made this ourselves. So, if you're not familiar with data, that's fine. You can still see everything from this brace here to this brace here represents an entire chunk of data that exists for one tutorial. So in this one, HTML and CSS fundamentals, you can see all this information about it. So the source comes from Microsoft Virtual Academy. The author is Bob Tabor. And this, we made all this, right? So like title wasn't something that existed before we said, okay, we want this thing to be called title, and we're going to take in whatever the title is of that tutorial. So we wrote all this ourselves, and the most interesting part to me was thinking about in the future how we're going to need this data, right? So what are we going to need from it? How do we want to access it? And is it going to be organized in such a way that is not only easily accessible by us, but makes sense to other people if they were ever to look at it and need to use it? So it was actually really interesting to go from that early on phase. Like we couldn't do anything without this data, and so we really had to plan ahead beforehand though. So it was really a unique way of going about things. So with that said, those are the basics of the site. Let's take a look at how it all came together. All right, so here is the final iteration of our project. I use that term loosely because it's final in terms of this is what we submitted and demonstrated and showed off in class. But there's plenty more we want to work on and get this thing, really usable and out there. So it's called the Resourcerer. Again, the whole idea of this project, in a nutshell, was to provide a place where different tutorials are listed for different topics. And that way you don't spend as much time Googling and looking for tutorials that are out there online and not really knowing what you're getting into. So we wanted to have a database where you can look up JavaScript, get a whole bunch of tutorials, and you can pick what you want based on the reviews and user ratings and stuff like that. So that's the goal. Let's take a look. So here's our front page, a little bit cleaner. These are just going to be kind of randomly generated topics that you can pick. So let's say we just wanted to go to React from here. Picture's down. That's okay. So here's an example. It looks a bit different. Same idea. So right now we have 2 tutorials: React tutorial, React fundamentals, and it's just got the reviews, got the user reviews here. Some of the quick facts you might want: difficulty, course length, price, etc. One of the cool things I'll show here. This was something we really wanted to have happen was we wanted to utilize React's features. So we wanted to make sure that if we added a review, it showed up immediately. So let's say Jeff wants to say, great course. We'll add that, give it a rating of 5, submit review, and bam, it pops up right in the bottom. And that was utilizing some of the React's features, and rendering the page as soon as something changed and just adding this here. So we really enjoyed that feature, and we'll show off some of the other stuff that we used. So let's say, that was the home page. If you go to front end or back end, that will just show you, my server actually went down, so let me just bring that back up. All right. Okay, so now this is the, right here, this connects our server to the database, so we're actually able to access the data that we have. And if I reload this, we should be getting, okay. So in our front end, we have these topics that are that's currently all we have, because all of our data was put in by us. So we don't have a huge library of resources right now. So here's our backend page. Let's say you wanted to learn about Express. You click Express, and you get 2 different tutorials with the reviews. The highest rating is at the top. The highest rated tutorials at the top. One of the other cool things we really were proud of was this filter feature. So let's say you just wanted like a quick course. You didn't want to spend a lot of time. So let's organize it by less than 10 hours. We'll do less than 5 hours because we have one that's 2 hours and this one here is 15. So if we do less than 5 hours, this one's going to go away, and immediately it's re-renders with the current criteria, and we have just this one. So this was actually pretty challenging to get this filter function to work. But again, you can see there's no submit button. As soon as you change the state, it completely changes, and you don't have to click submit or anything like that. It just totally re-renders the page with all the matching criteria. And the last thing we'll show, so in our nav bar, is this add tutorial. So this is an option if you wanted to, say you came across something on Express online, but it's not currently in our database. You can go to add tutorial, enter all this information about it, add tutorial, and then it will be available to see on the Express tutorial page. I'm not going to go through it because it's a lot, and the add tutorial actually does write it to our database, and I don't want just a bunch of dummy data written there. But yeah, so that is our project. I think we're all pretty proud of how it came out. I think there's a lot of work to do if we wanted to get this, as a viable resource for people. But we definitely think it solves a problem that currently exists. I know it's something I would have enjoyed using when I was researching tools and tutorials for getting prepared to learn this stuff. So definitely give me some advice if you have any feedback on the site. Hopefully we'll be able to get a live version up and running relatively soon. Yeah, so that's our project 3, Resourcerer.
All right, so there you have it. There's my third project. Got about 2.5 to 3 weeks left of the class. So it's pretty crazy how fast things are going. We're going to start learning Ruby, and then after that, we're going to do our final project, and that's it. And after that, I am a full-stack web developer. So pretty crazy to say that, pretty crazy that it's going to actually happen, and the job search begins pretty soon.